Hello everyone, my name is Keely. Welcome to my channel. Welcome back if you've been here before. Today I'm going to talk about all the books that I read in the month of March. So I read 14 books in March, resulting in 5,178 pages. So although I read less books in March than I have been, I read significantly more pages because the books I was reading were actually a lot bigger than usual. So I actually read so much more than I thought I would in March, and I read so many good books as well. My average rating for March was actually 3.9, which is my best reading month quality-wise as well. So overall, great reading month. I also participated in Relmathon, which is Cassidy from Covers with Cassidy's readathon she did all month long, and I loved it so much. I love participating in Relmathon. I think it is a great and creative readathon. So I also did vlog a lot for the month. So a lot of these books, I'm really not going to talk too much about them because I did 2 separate vlogs about them. So I will leave those vlogs down below so you can go watch them, especially if you want to know a little bit more about what I was thinking about each book and in real time. So as always, I'm going to talk about these books in the order that I read them in, starting with Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera. So this is Amy Tintera's adult thriller debut, and we follow this girl named Lucy. 5 years ago, Lucy was living in her small Texas town when one day her best friend was murdered, and Lucy was found wandering the streets with her best friend's blood all over her. Now, everyone thinks that Lucy murdered her best friend, but the catch is Lucy has no memory of that night, so not even she knows if she murdered her best friend or not, because she had severe, head trauma from this night. So she has no memory of it. So the whole time we're reading this book, we are trying to figure out what happened, and so is she. But this character, Lucy, is one of my favorite characters I've ever read from before. She is so funny and also just so unusual because of the trauma she's experienced and not knowing if she committed this murder. Whenever she looks at someone, she visualizes murdering them to see if she could have actually done it or not. And so she'll use the most random objects, like in a grocery store, in the house, wherever she sees that person, and visualize the murder. So the whole time you're like, did she actually do this? Or is she just going through so much trauma that her brain is acting kind of funky? It was so fast-paced, I could not put it down. There's also a podcast element in this book, so that was really, really interesting. I really loved that because it helped split up the chapters, although the chapters were short, so you literally were just flipping pages. This book also does take place in a small Texas town, and I live in a very small Texas town, so everything Amy Tintera was describing, I was like, yeah, that person also lives in my town. But yes, I loved this book so much. One of my favorites of the year so far, and I gave it 5 stars. Next, I read Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Caesar, and this is a young adult slasher. I feel like it could also be categorized as adult. It is young adult because we follow these young adult characters and these teenagers, but a lot of the scenes that are described can be very gory, so just be aware of that if you don't like that this book contains a lot of slashing and it's very descriptive, which I enjoy. So this book is about this small town once again, and there are killer clowns slashing, dicing, cutting left and right. That's all you really need to know. So this was one of those books, the whole time I was reading I was like, do I hate this or do I love it? And I think I kind of hated it, but in an enjoyable way. That makes no sense, but the problem here is these characters are some of the most unbearable characters I have ever seen in my entire life. If I met them in real life, they had it coming. Let me just tell you, I hated them. And this book I feel like tried to redeem some of them, and at this point for these characters I was just like, there's no redeeming you in my eyes. I also think the main girl, she had moved into this town, so she was new. I think she was so dumb. So dumb. But yes, I hated these characters. However, I loved the slashing, and this was so much fun to read, so fast-paced, and because I hated these characters, I wanted them to die so much. Unfortunately, they didn't die as soon as I wanted, but I am debating on continuing because I gave this one 3 stars. I hated it, but I also enjoyed it. I don't really know. Next, I read Dry by Neil Shusterman, and this is a standalone dystopian set in a world where water runs out. We are in California and the pipes have run dry, and we are starting from the very moment the sinks stop working. And so now, obviously, you can tell what's going to happen. Pure chaos, because people are dying of thirst, dehydration. They are willing to do whatever it takes. This book was so wonderful. Neil Shusterman really knows how to write dystopian, which I just feel like if we ever go through something like this, Neil Shusterman is going to be the man to talk to because he understands how everything works. But as I was reading this, I was also getting so dehydrated. I just needed to gulp up water because I could viscerally feel what the characters were experiencing at this time. We also do follow several different point of views, which I really love, and they were all very unique and had different voices. Like one of them in here was like a doomsdayer, another one was taking care of her little brother, and another one was kind of like, is she a convict? We don't know. But it was really fascinating, super fast paced, because this one is a little chunkier, but I could not put it down, and I read it in like almost a day because I was so addicted to it. I also did tear up at the end because Neil Shusterman's writing is beautiful. Like some of the messages he came across in this book was just amazing. I also forgot, this is with his son, Jared Shusterman. So this is by Neil and Jared Shusterman, and I just think it was seamless and fantastic, and I gave it 5 stars. Next, I read Lord of the Flies by William Golding. I'm actually a high school English teacher, and so I was reading this with my classes, so technically I read this book 5 times. This was actually a reread for me. I read it several years ago. The first time I read it, I absolutely hated it. Now upon reread and teaching it to my classes, I enjoyed it more, but I still gave it 3 stars because it's not my absolute favorite, especially out of all the books we've read so far this year. It's not my favorite, but I also don't hate it anymore. Next, I read Talon by Julie Kagawa, and in this book, we follow 2 teenagers who are actually dragons. They have trained their whole life to kind of assimilate into human culture and try to kind of pretend to be real people, and so they are being implanted into this small beach town and pretending to be humans. On the other side of thing, there is this kind of like company group that are dragon hunters. So they get word that there might be a dragon in this town, so they want to go and get rid of it. This book has been on my shelf for so long, and it was actually so much fun. I was worried this was going to be very fantasy, but it is set in our world, which is like the fantasy I actually like. I also really liked that they were dragon shifters, so we get to see them in dragon form and human form. And the politics in this world is fascinating because the dragons are very strict. They have so many rules, and this is one of those books where both sides are kind of starting to figure out that the people and the groups they are a part of are actually really bad. And I love books like that where people are taught one thing their whole life, and as they grow up and get away from it, they realize, hold on, what we've been learning this whole time is actually really bad, and now we need to escape for our lives. And this book was exactly that. I love the characters in here. I think we're starting to develop into a love triangle, and I already know who I want our main girl with. From the very first moment, I knew who I wanted her with, but I'm getting nervous that she's not going to be with that person. But also, this cover is stunning because it's all scaly. So cool. I am definitely planning on continuing the series. I gave it 4 stars. Next, I read The Stranded by Sarah Daniels. This is also a dystopian book, and in this one, it's so unique. It's unlike any dystopian I've read, which a lot of dystopians can seem very similar, but this one in particular takes place on a cruise ship. And these people have been on this cruise ship for 40 years. Because 40 years ago, there was this war going on all over the world, and they let out this virus, and so people are on this cruise ship because others are worried that they're still carrying the virus, and so they've had to be stranded on this ship for 40 years, although no virus has been detected in our main character's lifetime. So she is actually training to be a medic because every so often a few people are let off the ship, and medics, if they score top in their class, are able to go on the land to go to medical school. So she's learning to be a medic. On the other hand, we follow someone who is working with the rebellion. We also follow another point of view who is the bad guy, the dictator on the ship. So it's really cool too because we get the point of view of the bad guy, and usually in dystopian we don't necessarily see that, but I love that this was point of view or multi-POV, and we get to see so many different aspects of the ship, and it made it even more like terrifying and suspenseful because they're on this cruise ship. When bad things happen, they can't get off. It was so fast-paced, again, short chapters. Really loved it, and I just love dystopian, and I feel like this is very new and innovative, and I gave it 5 stars. Next, I read Heart of Iron by Ashley Poston, and again, this is another multi-POV story. So one of the POVs we follow is this girl who is looking for this ship because her best friend is an android. and she also questionably has feelings for this robot, but unfortunately her robot best friend is kind of dying, and so she is looking for coordinates for this old lost ship because she believes the answer is on that ship. And so she's trying to find it when comes along this boy who is also trying to find the coordinates to that ship because he believes that his dad is somehow involved. So they cross paths, and they are ending up going to have to work together to find the ship because they have two different goals, but ultimately they both want to find the ship. We also follow another point of view, which is the girl's pilot, and he's a really, really fun character. And then we also follow the point of view of her robot best friend slash love interest. So there's a lot going on in this, but it's actually not like super confusing. It's very, very simple. If you've read the Lunar Chronicles, this is almost identical. Almost identical. Down to character names and plots. Like, very identical. Which, I love the Lunar Chronicles. I will say that these characters aren't as, like, heart-wrenching and lovable for me as the Lunar Chronicles. I'm way more obsessed with them. But I did love all of the characters in here and some of the relationships we see. Still questioning the girl and the robot thing, but there are other relationships that are really great. Overall, this was a really great, fun sci-fi book, and it was really fast-paced. I loved how it was written, and I love, once again, the multi-POV, and I love Ashley Poston, but this was her first full novel not to get 5 stars for me, but I did give it 4 stars. Next, I read Arsenic and Adobo by Mia P. Manansala, and in this one we follow a girl named Leela, and she works in her family's restaurant when one day in walks in her ex-boyfriend, who is a food critic, and he is like out to get all the restaurants in this town when he is eating their food and he dies. And now she is being blamed for murder. So these people in here are trying to investigate and find out what really happened to this man. So this is actually a cozy mystery, and I wasn't sure about that, but I loved it so much. I actually feel the same way as I did when I first read Finley Donovan is Killing It. It gave me the same vibes, and I love the murder mystery. I was also unsure about her different aunties because they are like nosy, gossipy, and I was worried they were gonna be annoying, but I love them so much. And they're also known as the calendar ladies because their names are like April, May, and June. I love that. Iconic. The food in here, everything I wanted it to be. We get to see so many different cultures. It is incredible. The food sounds delicious. I really love all the characters, and I'm so excited to continue on with the series. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Next, I read Keeper of the Lost Cities by Shannon Messenger. This is a chunky middle grade, and I absolutely flew through it. So in this book, we follow a little girl named Sophie who, since she was 5 years old, has been able to read minds. And she realizes that this is a weird thing. Nobody else can do it, so she doesn't really tell anyone until one day she's on a school field trip at a museum, and this boy comes up to her and tells her that he can also read minds, and you're actually an elf. So Sophie finds out she's an elf, she gets immersed into this new elven world and has to figure out who she is and why she has the powers that she does. So good, so good. I love Sophie so much. This elven world is so fascinating, and there's also a lot of creatures in here we get to meet. There's so many different magical elements, which was so much fun. And there is a school setting, and I absolutely loved seeing Sophie at school and going through her different classes and also trying to navigate who she is, why her whole life has basically been a lie, and also why she is so powerful. I absolutely loved it. I honestly think this was my favorite book of the month, and of course I gave it 5 stars, and this series is actually pretty long, and I'm definitely going to read all of them. Next, I read The Invisible Life of Addy LaRue by V.E. Schwab, and let's just add this to the list of books that everybody loves and I don't. So let me first tell you what this is about. This book follows a girl named Addy LaRue, and she is in her 20s, and she is actually hundreds of years old. So back in, I believe, the 1600s, she accidentally prayed to the gods that answer at night, and they gave her a long, long life, immortality, but the catch is nobody will ever remember her. So as soon as she leaves a room, people forget her until one day she's in New York City and this man remembers her, and they kind of start this relationship. So the writing in here, so beautiful, but I don't like that. I can recognize it's beautiful writing, but I personally do not like beautiful writing because it feels like I am like trying so hard to get my way through a book, and it's just dragging me down. The writing just felt so slow, and I was honestly so bored during this. I did really love the timelines. This is also a very historical novel, so we get to see so many different places throughout the years, the decades, the hundreds and hundreds of years, and I loved that, but I was so bored, and this is such a character-driven story, and I did not like the characters. I didn't hate Addy Laro, I just didn't care for her. I did, however, hate or dislike Henry, which is the guy in here. Overall, there were some lines in here that I was like, I would get that as a tattoo, but I am not one of those people that likes beautiful, flowery, descriptive writing. I am a simple girly through and through, so I ended up giving this one 2 stars, and I will be unhauling it, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. The last 4 books I read in March were actually not in any vlogs, so this is all new information to you, but the next book I finished was Love Redesigned by Lauren Asher, and this one I read with Katie from Katie's Book Nook, and this is a very, very chunky romance, and I got this from Kindle Unlimited, and in this book we follow this woman who actually has like a renovation TV show, and she is actually coming back home because something terrible happened with her and her fiance. They broke up, and so now she is coming home. When she comes across her family's like really, really close friends, like their families are like very connected, but she hates him, and he is a billionaire because he also has like this renovation company that's very, very successful. When one day she sees this house for sale that she's always wanted in her hometown, and she wants to buy it, he wants to buy it, they decide they have to work together, and this relationship happens. So this book really had me going in the first half. I was super obsessed in the first 50%, and after that, I just kind of got a little bored, and I didn't love the characters as much. I really think that what it came down to was this book was just way too long. This is a romance book that's over 500 pages, and I just don't think it should be that long, but I am interested in reading more from this author, but I gave it 3 stars. However, the first half was way more than 3 stars, but still, overall, this was a 3-star book for me. Next, I read The Tyrants Tomb by Rick Riordan. This is book 4 in the Trials of Apollo series. So this series follows the god Apollo, who is being punished, and his punishment is being sent down to Earth to live his life as a mortal teenager. So obviously this is well into the series. I only have 1 more book left to go. I will say I think this is my least favorite in the series so far. I just felt like it was a little bit slower, and I wasn't reading it as quick, and I just didn't feel like picking up as much as I did the other ones, so I gave it 4 stars. The next book I read was The Darkness Rises by Stacey Stokes. This is a young adult mystery book where we follow this girl who can see when people are close to death. The way that she is able to tell someone is close to death is they start developing this dark cloud over their head, and so she is struggling with the moral dilemma of should she save them or should she just let them die? Because last year she saved a boy who was about to die, and he ended up going on to murder several people. So she is definitely struggling with guilt and morality and what she should do with this power that she has. So I really love Stacey Stokes. This is the 2nd book I've read from her, and she always weaves a little magic into her contemporary stories. This book was very hard-hitting. If you're going to read it, check trigger warnings because it does deal with a topic that I know most people would not be comfortable reading about. However, for me, I'm fine reading about it. And this one was really interesting because of that magic element of being able to see when people are close to death. I also love reading about characters who are having that morality struggle of should I save someone or should I just let them die? Whitney was a really fascinating character to follow. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. It is super dark, super emotional, but very, very interesting and very suspenseful because you're trying to figure out what's going on. Overall, I give this one 4 stars. The last thing I read in March was The Heart of a Mother by Julie Clark. This is actually the 4th short story in the Obsession Amazon Original Stories collection, so it's very, very short. In this one, we follow a woman who, when she was a teenager, became pregnant and had to give her baby up for adoption. Now she is older, and she has put everything on every kind of DNA website in the hopes that one day she gets to meet her daughter. One day she gets a match and she ends up stalking this daughter. So this was really interesting. I wasn't sure about it going into it. Like when I first started it, I was like, okay, I'm not sure about this. But then the stalking element was really, really interesting. And this relationship that they started forming, even though the daughter did not know who the woman was really fascinating. And I also really liked how this one ended. So I ended up giving it 4 stars. So those are all of the books that I read in the month of March. Let me know down below your favorite book that you read. If you've made it this far in the video, go ahead and leave the star emoji because Addy has a constellation on her face. But that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. As always, all my social media links will be down below, and I will see you next time. Bye!